Hey everybody, this is Chad with Thriving Canine, continuing the behavior modification series that I've been working on. Sorry it's been taking a little while, but what I want to talk about today is the 6 basic concepts, principles, techniques, whatever you want to call it, but 6 basic things that we're going to use to solve almost any behavior problem. Or any behavior problem that you're working on, some of these are going to be used, or some combination of these will be used. Not necessarily all 6, but basic principles so that you guys have sort of a blueprint of something to think about as you're trying to figure out whatever behavior problem you might be having. Okay? So, first thing on the list I want to talk about is management. Management. So, that typically means controlling the environment or controlling the dog's access to the environment. So using baby gates to keep a dog out of a particular room is management. Crates, exercise pens, leashes, all these things are considered management. So typically the reason for using management is to set the dog up for success. In other words, you're stopping the bad behavior from happening, so that behavior is not becoming a habit, or the habit is not becoming ingrained, so the dog is not practicing the unwanted behavior, essentially. But you could also be doing controlled setups where maybe you are setting the dog up to attempt to do the bad behavior, but you've got your management in place, meaning that you can handle that situation and guide the dog out of that behavior or into another behavior. Okay? So now, which brings us to number 2. Speaking of guiding the dog into another behavior, the other thing besides management then is redirection. So you're going to redirect the dog. So that's where we're thinking in terms of, rather than just telling the dog to stop doing this unwanted behavior, that we're redirecting the dog's energy and focus into a more preferred behavior or an acceptable behavior. Most common thing you hear about is people teaching dogs to greet people by sitting. So then the dog's not running around acting crazy, jumping all over if he's sitting. So that's the concept anyway. Of course, the dog can sit and then jump and then sit again. So yeah, we have to watch out for that. But basically the concept is you're redirecting the dog into some other behavior. So you're telling the dog what to do as opposed to what not to do. Okay? So that's redirection. Okay? Another basic principle, third one on our list. These aren't necessarily in any particular order, okay? But so the next one on my list I have here is desensitize or desensitization. So this has more to do when you're socializing a dog, typically when dogs are nervous, anxious, overreactive, aggressive, things like this. You're desensitizing them to whatever it is that's getting them overstimulated or nervous or defensive or whatever the thing is. So that's just really about exposure. But it's about, typically what we're talking about is a gradual exposure. Sometimes if it's a noise, the noise is going to be far away, or you're going to somehow control the volume. That's sort of back to the management. We're managing that situation so we're not just overwhelming the dog, but you're exposing the dog to whatever that sound is or that sight is or the thing. If it's men that wear hats that the dog's got a problem with, then you desensitize. Maybe you have everybody in the house wear hats. You get the dog used to hats, and then you get the dog used to men wearing hats, and then strange unknown men wearing hats or whatever. Anyway, there's a million examples, but desensitizing is just little bits of exposure that don't overstress the dog. You're going to have to stress the dog a little, so there's a little bit of an art to it, but you're just desensitizing. Okay? Now, kind of along with that comes our 4th one on our list, which is counter conditioning. So this is where we're not only just exposing the dog to the thing. Desensitizing is exposing the dog to where they just sort of become numb to it, or it just becomes normal noises around here, normal stuff going on. Counter conditioning is where we actually try to take the thing that the dog has an issue with. Maybe the dog's afraid of it or whatever, and you're going to try and take something the dog doesn't like, for example, and make them like it. So the scary guy in the hat is throwing treats at the dog, and the dog starts to go, oh, wait a second. Men wearing hats have food on them. So the dog starts to have a more positive association with that. So I think, hey, guys with hats are cool. I like guys with hats. Something like that. I'm just throwing out examples. Just remember, everything I'm talking about here is general concepts. So just to recap so far, management, controlling the environment, access the environment, so forth. Redirecting the dog to a more appropriate behavior. Desensitizing the dog, just enough exposure where the dog just adapts to it. Counter conditioning, where we're actually throwing a positive spin on something that maybe the dog didn't like. If you want to get a little more complicated, there's also negative counter conditioning, where you would take something the dog doesn't like and then, or something that the dog does like and make them not like it. That, which brings us to number 5 when we get into correction, aka also some people use the word punishment. I think the word punishment is kind of an emotional trigger for people, and the word correction sounds more appropriate because it sounds like we're making something correct. It sounds more educational, where punishment tends to just sound like, oh, you're just doing something mean to the dog. We're not trying to be mean to the dog. This is all in the context of trying to educate the dog or develop the dog's character or help the dog through a problem, right? So, but a correction is where you're creating some kind of a negative consequence to teach a dog to stop doing a behavior or to avoid a behavior. So, sometimes people will say the dog's getting on the counters and they'll booby trap it somehow. They'll tape some aluminum cans to on a string, taped to a little plate with some cheese on it. When the dog pulls the plate, the cans come crashing down. That would be a correction. That makes, I used to like to get on the counter because there's food there, but now the counter, there's scary things on the counter, so the dog stays away from the counter or whatever. I'm not necessarily suggesting that. I've never actually done that technique, but it's just an example that sometimes people do. Okay? Another thing would just be telling the dog no, or maybe shoving them off the counter obviously without harming them, but just, hey, off, and just teaching them no. But that's a correction. You're telling the dog, you're correcting that behavior by telling the dog that is an unwanted behavior, or it's not allowed, or something like that. So there has to be a little bit of negativity to it. Some cases maybe there has to be more negativity, but that's getting into the art of dog training, and you get into ethical questions and things like that. But there needs to be the concept of no and negatives from time to time. Some people try to say you can avoid that. Good luck, but I don't think so. I think in reality, with what most people want from their dogs and the amount of time they have, we have to create negative consequences. To me, the ethical thing is just about being fair, being clear, trying alternatives first before we just jump right into, no. We don't want to have a dog that thinks their name is no, correct? So anyway, so that's your correction. Okay, now, so that's 5. I promised 6. So number 6 is extinction, right? So the concept of extinction is basically that a behavior goes away through lack of reinforcement. So there's no rewarding going on, and there's no correction or punishment going on. It's just, it becomes a fruitless endeavor, so the dog will give up on it. This works mostly when you're talking about something that you can actually control to make sure there's no reward happening. So say like attention-seeking behavior. The dog's trying to get your attention. Maybe the dog's barking at the door trying to get let in. In theory, if you just ignore that, the dog will eventually stop barking, and they'll realize the barking doesn't make that door open. I don't get any attention. Right? That would be extinction. Or the dog trying to jump on you. It's difficult, but in theory, if you just ignore them, eventually they'll stop doing that. Right? But if the behavior itself is somehow reinforcing, or the environment is somehow reinforcing the behavior, or it's just an outlet for their energy and things like that, then extinction alone will not work. Okay, but the main thing is just making sure that behavior is not being rewarded in some way. Okay, so recap here. This sounds pretty simple, but if you think about it, when you break things down, you look at any problem behavior that you're working on, or that you have worked on, or that you're seeing other videos or reading other articles or whatever, you're going to find these basic concepts are at the root of it. So you've got management, redirection, counter conditioning, desensitization, correction, and extinction. Those are your big 6. Okay, and remember, this is a series too, so if you haven't seen the others, go back, watch from part 1, and go on, because this is a collection of concepts and ideas to give anybody who's interested a roadmap to solve any particular behavior problem or combination of behavior problems you might have. Okay, so thank you very much. This is Chad with Thriving Canine. Please feel free to go to thrivingcanine.com for a bunch more information, or the YouTube channel. Don't forget, please like and subscribe and share and all that good stuff, because if you like this information and you think it's valuable, then get it out there to people. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good one.